Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Ice Barrier Yu-Gi-Oh deck profile for post-freezing chains. This was the latest structure deck that was released for the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG, and with it we got an update to a deck I never thought would actually get support, and that was the Ice Barrier deck. This deck originally came out during the Hidden Arsenal booster packs, giving us some kind of, underwhelming support. It wasn't really what you would call a deck that could work together with all the cards that the Ice Barriers received, but I still did many deck profiles over the years, just trying to make the deck as playable as I could. But with the latest structure deck, we actually have some playability for this deck, so I figured an update was definitely due for the deck as a whole. So let's go ahead and get started with the video. So for the new Ice Barrier support, and let me tell you, a good majority of it makes up the Ice Barrier deck, because it's just so consistent with, none of the old support really, aside from a few cards here or there, with the first of those cards being Revealer of the Ice Barrier. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent cannot tribute summon, and you can only use each of the following effects of Revealer of the Ice Barrier once per turn. You can discard one card to special summon one Ice Barrier tuner from your deck, and also you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except for water monsters. And if you would discard or send a card from your hand to the graveyard to activate an Ice Barrier monster's effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead of one of those cards. So it makes up for the minus that you would give to yourself for a bunch of different Ice Barrier cards, but also just being able to prevent your opponent from tributing is a big part of a lot of different deck plays. And the easy special summon definitely makes it a 3 of in the deck for just being able to set up a good majority of your synchro summons for a lot of the different Ice Barrier synchro monsters that we run. And I also run 3 of the new Speaker for the Ice Barrier. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, defense position monsters your opponent control cannot change their battle position, and you can only use each of the following effects of Speaker of the Ice Barrier once per turn. If you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon one Ice Barrier token, Aqua, level 1, attack 0, defense 0. So more setup, and the fact that it basically freezes your opponent's monsters from changing their battle position makes it all the better. Definitely would play into the playstyle of the Ice Barriers. I felt if they would have focused on this card effect for a good majority of their older support, or just making it so your opponent's monsters can't change their battle position, would have made an insanely better deck than what we had with all the other different monster effects that, like I said, didn't really meld together much to make an Ice Barrier deck. But another 3 of the fact that they're both level 4 monsters opens us up to the Bahamut Shark play if you wish to run that as an added option with your synchro summons in the deck. And I also run 3 General Wayne of the Ice Barrier. I would say one of the more higher level monsters in the deck. A good majority of older deck profiles for Ice Barriers that I ran revolved around just some of the higher level boss monsters for a lot of the different plays, but we can stick to the extra deck for the higher level monsters for those synchros, with, like I said, General Wayne being the highest level main deck monster I run. Spell and traps sent from the field to your opponent's graveyard are banished instead, and you can only use each of the following effects of General Wayne of the Ice Barrier once per turn. If your opponent controls a monster and you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is normal or special summon, you can add 1 Ice Barrier spell trap from your deck to the hand. So the fact that it can be an Ice Barrier card and Medallion of the Ice Barrier, it's literally just a monster search. You search out the spell card, and then you use Medallion to search out any of the monsters you need. With the, like I said, Ice Barriers have one of the best search spells in the game, being able just to add 1 Ice Barrier monster from your deck to your hand. There's no limitations. It's not a once per turn, and the fact that Wayne can search out that card makes it all the better. And one of the older cards that you definitely want to run 3 of is Prior of the Ice Barrier. If you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. You cannot special summon any level 5 or higher monsters the turn you special summon this way, and you can tribute this card to target 1 Ice Barrier monster in your graveyard except Prior of the Ice Barrier and special summon that target. So I would say a lot better for the fact that we do have link monsters in the deck, so we may be limited from some of the higher level monsters, but being able to rely on a bunch of different link monsters with Prior, or even just the fact that Totally Awesome on its own is a rank 2 Aqua type monster that needs 2 Aqua type monsters, means we can just go with these 2 cards into Totally Awesome and skip the entire Bahamut Shark process if we need to with that play. For some of the lower numbers for the Ice Barrier monsters, I also run 2 Jujin of the Ice Barrier. You can tribute this card to special summon one level 5 or higher Ice Barrier monster from your hand. If this card is in your graveyard, except the turn it was sent there, you can target one level 3 or lower, basically level 3 or higher, my mistake there. Water monster you control, reduce its level by exactly 2. And if you do special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field, you can only use each of the following effects of Jujin Ice Barrier once per turn. So it's more setup. You need a couple monsters on the field to rely on special summoning out your Trishula, Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier, or even just the original Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier. So being able to rely on Jujin to have this easy special summon setup and level adjustment comes in play a lot, but I wouldn't say it's as consistent as just some of the overall setup that some of the other 3-ofs we run, so that's why I'm only running it at 2 in the deck. The same goes for Hexa Spirit of the Ice Barrier. I would definitely say one of the more adorable Ice Barrier monsters. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent controls basically all their monsters lose 500 attack and defense, and during your main phase, you can send one level 3 or lower Ice Barrier monster from your deck or graveyard to the graveyard. And if you do, this card's level becomes the same as that monster's. So graveyard setup is a big plus with this card, but being able to adjust the level, it is a level 1 tuner, but being able to then summon it and then adjust its level with Revealer and having plenty of different level monsters to adjust it to make it all the better for sure. But once again, it's easy setup. It's also a 1-for-1 target to get onto the field, and just having the one you need is really all you can rely on with this card. Having just more options for that setup. It doesn't really have a special summon option. You just rely on it for that play. And then for some of the one-ofs for the Ice Barriers, going for a lot of the old support for the one-ofs, I run 1 Dance Princess of the Ice Barrier. I do like the return set play with your opponent's spell traps. If you didn't want to run any copies of Dance Princess, you can always put in an additional copy of Defender of the Ice Barrier or Strategist of the Ice Barrier. Running one of each of these, with Strategist being a once per turn, you can send 1 Ice Barrier monster from your hand to the graveyard to draw 1 card, and making up for this for the fact that Revealer can banish itself from the graveyard instead of you sending, meaning that you'll just plus off of the 1 draw, being able to rely on your graveyard for that play. And Defender of the Ice Barrier, while you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters your opponent control cannot declare an attack if their attack is greater than or equal to this card's defense. So just another good lockdown. When you special summon this card, it basically does what some of the other cards play on, and that is freezing your opponent's monsters, but just with their attacks, while the other ones focus more on the battle position. So each one brings something different to the deck, whether it be draw power, stopping your opponent's attacks, or just returning some of their setup they may have on the field. But once again, if you wanted to take out the Dance Princess, you could always put in a second copy of Defender or Strategist. Player choice with that selection. And then for some of the non-Ice Barrier support, I also run 2 Silent Angler. If you control a water monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, but you cannot special summon monsters from your hand for the rest of this turn. So with it, you can always summon out Prior first and then Angler, and then not really limited with the play, since Prior just says level 5 or higher monsters for the special summon after this card, giving you just another resource on the field. And the fact that Silent Angler is a level 4 water monster just gives us more access to our Bahamut Shark play also. And then lastly, to finish off the monsters, I run 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, just the go-to hand trap in the deck, being able to shut down your opponent's plays. While if you go first, you can Trishula or any other monster for the summon, Ash Blossom, and then stopping your opponent's plays, and then being able to go off with your own plays makes it a definite 3-of for sure. And that is it for the monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. We did get a good amount of new Ice Barrier support. So before we get to the best search or medallion, I also run 3 Wins over the Ice Barrier. You tribute any number of Ice Barrier monsters and special summon from your deck that many level 4 lower Ice Barrier monsters with different names from each other. And during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard to target one of your Ice Barrier monsters that is banished or in your graveyard and add to your hand. You can only use each effect of Wins over the Ice Barrier once per turn. So the recycle power with Revealer is definitely important with this card for the fact that you'll banish for making up for some of the send effects in the deck, so being able to then add her back to your hand to reuse again, and just more of the different search. We have plenty of different level Ice Barrier monsters, so being able to special summon those different ones onto the field can give us our requirements for a bunch of the different synchro monsters we run in the extra deck. I also run 3 Freezing Chains of the Ice Barrier, the continuous spell. When this card is activated, you can target 1 level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and while you control 3 or more Ice Barrier monsters you control are unaffected by the activated effects of your opponent's monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck, and you can only activate 1 Freezing Chains of the Ice Barrier per turn. So this, you have basically protection against your opponent's monsters, but the special summon of this card is very important as well, being able to rely on it for a good amount of different resources to extend from your graveyard, depending on what you may have in there to use. And then now relying on the best searcher for the deck, and that is Medallion of the Iceberg. You just add one Iceberg monster from your deck to your hand, and there's no restriction. If you open up multiple copies of this card, you can activate all of them. It's not a once per turn. It's searchable off of our General Wayne, which I spoke of before, just being able to add an Ice Barrier spell or trap, which the fact that this card has Ice Barrier in its name makes it all the better. I didn't think when this card was originally released, people thought, Ice Barriers would be that relevant of a deck that if it was, given all this new support, having this searcher would definitely be that dangerous, but the fact that we still have it at 3, let's enjoy it while we do. And for a couple more lower numbers, I also run 2 salvage. You definitely have the special summon option with your freezing chains of the Ice Bear, but sometimes just being able to add some of them back to your hand for re-special summoning can give you more resources, especially since we're not limited with a good amount of them, like your Silent Angler and also your Prior of the Ice Bear, both being able to be added back to the hand with salvage and then re-special summon back onto the field. And then for some of the one-ofs for the spells, I run 1 Call by the Grave, 1 for 1, 1 Foolish Burial, and 1 Monster Reborn. Special summoning options, setting up the graveyard, special summoning out our go-to level 1 monster onto the field to use, which is Hexa Spirit of the Ice Bear, and then Call by the Grave is pretty standard, just stopping plays in your opponent's graveyard. And all one-ofs I definitely do think should be run for easy setup in the deck. And then for the traps, the only trap I'm running in the deck, I'm testing out 1 Terror of Trishula. You apply these effects in sequence depending on the number of Ice Barrier Synchro monsters you control with different names. If it's 1, banish 1 card your opponent controls. 2, banish 1 card in your opponent's graveyard. 3, banish 1 card at random in your opponent's hand. And when your opponent activates a card effect that targets an Ice Barrier Synchro monster you control, you can banish this card from your graveyard to negate the effects. You can only use each effect of Trishula, I was about to say Terror of Trishula, once per turn. It's basically that. The effects of Trishula based on how many synchros you have out on the field, and the fact that we're not limited to the synchro monsters in the extra monster zone. Since Master Rule 5, we can summon all of them in the main monster zone and have no restrictions there. It's just that much easier to make use of this trap. But like I said, I was testing it out and just to see how it ran. It's not an Ice Barrier card either, so it's not searchable with that. But if I were to increase it, you can always try taking out some of the one-ofs. You can even reduce the number of salvages for additional copies of this. Just with more and more synchro plays you make, makes this more of an important card for all of your different banishing needs. Being able to banish Trishula, obviously with Trishula, and then have additional ones with this, makes it that scary of a card. And that is it for the main deck. When I move on to the X deck, I run 1 Trishula, 0 Dragon of the Ice Barrier. You need 1 tuner and 2 or more non-tuners. When this card synchro summon, you can banish up to 3 cards your opponent controls. If this card is synchro summon and its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can special summon 1 Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier from your X deck or graveyard. Its attack becomes 3,300, and they bat half the attack of any face-up monster you control currently, then negate their effects. And you can only use each of the following effects of Trishula, 0 Dragon of the Ice Bear once per turn. So this overall setup, being able to special summon Trishula, making its attack 3,300, then having the attack of any face-up monster your opponent controls, means you can hit for some pretty big damage with that monster after this card leaves the field. It's a higher level option to go up against your opponent with, but being able to then go into your next monster, which is Trishula, which then can banish other cards, 1 from your opponent's hand, field, and graveyard, makes it all the more scary of a card, for sure. For some of the other synchro options being 1 Brionac, 1 DeLorean, and 1 Gungnir. If you didn't want to run any of these options in the deck, I wanted to try them all out just to work with the trap card option of Terror of Trishula as well. But if you were to take out any numbers, you can always just increase the number of your Trishula for the plays as well for the setup. But one-ofs are each that I prefer in the deck. Like I said, just more and more different plays to rely on. For some of the other synchro plays, I also run 1 Adamancipator, Risen Dragite. Just another good water option for searching out cards and recycling them. 1 Crystron Amatrex, another great water option since we can be limited at times to summoning out water monsters, so being able to summon a level 5 option definitely does come in handy. Same with 1 Coral Dragon and 1 Glacial Beast Iceberg Narwhal. All the different water options for the synchro plays is what I found the best to use for when you just need those water attribute plays. For the Link monsters, I run 1 Miss Starboy, basically just powering up your water monsters. Marine Cess, Coral Anemone gives you more special summon options from the graveyard with your water attribute monsters. Halka-Fibrax with the different tuner plays, and being a water monster is just a bonus. And also working well with Amatrex if you already have this card set up in the graveyard. And lastly, 1 Area, the Water Charmer Gentle, for if you're going up against your opponent with any water monsters in their graveyard, being able to summon it onto your field for resources just makes it all the better. And for the Xyz monsters, I run the 1 Bahamut Shark and the 1 Totally Totally Awesome. The fact that you can go into Totally Awesome without having to even go into Bahamut Shark using this deck is a big plus there, but most of the time, if you have the 2 level 4s, being able to summon out Bahamut Shark and then just detach 1 for Totally Awesome is a definite play you want to rely on in the deck if you don't have the synchro options to go into, especially if cards like Prior to the Ice Barrier lock you out of your plays. You can at least go into your Link plays and your Xyz plays. And as for the go-to plays, there are a good amount of them. Just being able to summon out the Revealer of the Ice Barrier and then discarding 1 card to special summon 1 Ice Barrier monster from your deck means that you can have plenty of your graveyard setup with the discard and then special summoning out a different Ice Barrier tuner monster that you run depending on the play you want to go for. You have plenty of special summon cards to rely on. It can go into Defender of the Ice Barrier for a level 7 gun near play for this summon, or if you go for the level 1 option of Hexa Spirit can at least send another Ice Barrier to the graveyard depending on which one you send, raising its level up and then going into that additional play. You want to have at least a good number of different cards, but also then being able to have the discard play for the summon if you discard the level 2 option and have your level 7 monster special summoned out onto the field. You can also activate Freezing Chains of the Ice Barrier to summon out whatever you send to the graveyard. If it's Zujin, you have your Trishula play right there. If you have another discard option that you went for, let's say you went for Speaker of the Ice Barriers, you can then summon this card out on the field, and then you have your summon ready for your Trishula Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier. Depending on the levels you go for, or even just what you special summon off of your Revealer. You can even go for Hexa, having the same special summon, and then just have your Trishula play right there to use. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Like I said, I was definitely excited that the Ice Barriers are finally a more powerful, consistent deck than what they were before, and I definitely can't wait to test it out more. But I hope you all enjoyed the video. Until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.